Welcome everyone to the final session of today's workshop. My name is Adrianna Threpsiadi. I work at the Energy Saving Trust based in the UK. And this afternoon, our final session is going to be on the topic of encouraging public acceptance of technologies. So just to I'll give a brief introduction. I'll go through a few of the key learnings that we got from the Behave conference. And then we've got two presenters online, one from the Renewable Grids Initiative and IEECP, and another one from the Italian Energy Agency, ENEA. And there'll be Q&As after each presentation. So in the room, please feel free to think of your questions and ask them at the Q&A. And the same for people online. Hello, people online. I hope you're still with us. Type your questions in the Q&A box and we will get to the questions after each presentation. And then to round everything off, we'd also like to have a bit of a discussion to reflect on what we've learned from our two presenters and to get your views. So really looking forward to this session. It's a really important topic and it ties in very much to a lot of the key themes that we've been discussing earlier today on just transition and demand flexibility. So welcome again. So yeah, I'll kick off with a brief context setting just to get everyone on the same page about what we're talking about when we talk about public acceptance, and then we'll launch into the presentations. So what do we mean by public acceptance? Well, in this context, we simply mean it as whether the general population, the general public, either adopts or uses or accepts or supports any type of technology that helps us move away from a fossil fuel energy system. So it's about adopting, using, and generally accepting. And then in this context, again, when we say technologies, in this session, we're talking about a really broad swathe of technologies. So it could be anything from big energy infrastructure projects to small household level technologies that we use in our day-to-day lives. So we're going to be covering both of those things in this session. So there are lots of different ways in which public acceptance can be expressed. So when we have large energy infrastructure projects, a lot of the time we can either support or oppose these, either through how people vote or whether people protest against things. People can express their acceptance through their purchasing behaviours. So what are they buying? What are they investing in? Are they accepting it and actually making that commitment to buy something? And also actually using it. So once people have access to technologies, are they actually using them and are they using them correctly? So all of those types of behaviours is how we infer whether a technology has been accepted by the general public. And why are we talking about public acceptance? Why is it important? And I think this really ties into the themes of today because it ties into equity and the just transition. I think firstly it's important because if we are going to reach our climate targets, if we are going to reach carbon neutrality by 2050, there does need to be this big shift in the energy system, heating, how we use energy. And that needs everyone to come along with us on this transition. So we need to scale up, and to do that we need people to adopt new technologies and the new energy system. But more importantly, in order for it to be just and to be equitable and meet the needs of people, we need everyone to accept it. We don't want to be forcing a change onto people. People need to see the benefits for themselves and accept these technologies. So yeah, it's a really important topic, and it was a key theme at the Behave conference that we have been discussing today from last November. And so we want to carry on those discussions from the conference in this session and in our working group in the European Energy Network Behaviour Change Working Group. Public acceptance is going to be a theme that we'll carry on working on throughout the year and engaging our members on. So hopefully lots more to learn and discuss. So, okay, in the way of context setting and what we learned from the Behave conference, I think one of the main challenges that we saw is that there are lots of things that can block public acceptance, and I think these are quite well understood. So if there's misinformation or confusing information about a technology, that can lead to resistance to adopting it. If there's perceived risk about whether it's safe or appropriate, then that can also lead people to be skeptical. And also trust, so if people distrust the person or the institution promoting a particular technology, that can have a negative impact. And also the cultural norms in the target population and their personal habits, all of those behavioural factors can be a challenge and then lead to skepticism and resistance to adopting new technologies and change. But then on the flip side, public acceptance can be a good opportunity, because there are studies that we heard of at the Behave conference that showed that if people accept one technology, they might be more open-minded to accepting something else. So we can use public acceptance as an opportunity to open more doors to other technologies. And in this specific study from Behave, they looked at heat pump, people who had bought heat pumps, and 50% of the people who had adopted a heat pump said that they were more open-minded to adopting other energy efficiency measures. So half of the people said that they would then do more. So I think once we get the ball rolling with public acceptance and people see the value, then that could be an opportunity to introduce other technologies. So yeah, what else did we learn at Behave? I think, as I mentioned, there were so many different studies on this topic. Lots of different technologies were discussed. Heat pumps were discussed in quite a lot of detail. But I think the key message was that public acceptance varies drastically according to what technology we're talking about. So yes, never going to be one approach fits all. It does have many different factors that affect it depending on the technology. Also, the maturity of the technology matters a lot. So whether people have developed a stable attitude towards a technology matters. So if something's been around for a long while and people are familiar with it, they have more stable attitudes, whereas if something is novel to them, their attitudes are more changeable and less easy to predict. The visibility of the technology also matters. And this was another interesting study from Behave that showed that the visual familiarity that we have with heat pumps, so we have a picture of a heat pump here. So in the study, they found that the visibility of a heat pump actually negatively affected people's acceptance of them. So seeing, basically they didn't like what heat pumps look like. But on the flip side, with solar panels, there wasn't that there wasn't that negative impact. So the conclusion from the study was that because we're more familiar with seeing pictures of solar panels on roofs, we're more likely to accept them compared to things that we're not visually familiar with, like heat pumps. So these small things can really have an impact. And also there were other studies that showed that who is delivering a message about a technology also matters, and whether we trust that person. So there was a study about an energy community, and members of the energy community were more likely to adopt battery storage if another member of the energy community recommended it. So it goes back to what a theme that's come through in the discussions from today. It's like, who is delivering the message and who do we trust? And the person that we trust differs a lot from group to group. And finally, it's not just about cost. So what came through quite strongly in the Behave conference and all the studies that were presented was this theme that I think has been echoed here today, that actual decision making of real people isn't necessarily rational. So when we try and apply these rational actor models and try and predict acceptance of technologies based on those rational actor models, they're not as reliable. And instead we need to use and consider more social behavioural factors as well. And then, yeah, in terms of what can promote acceptance, so there were lots of studies that Behave that had a positive story about how we can promote public acceptance, and starting with giving people a voice. So this particular study from Behave was about large energy infrastructure projects. So they were asking people whether they would accept onshore wind and carbon capture storage projects. And they found that when they gave the population an opportunity to voice their opinion, they were more likely to accept the project. But in contrast, when they didn't give the population any opportunity to express their views, or they gave them a pseudo voice, so when they let people express their views but those views weren't listened to, then people were less likely to accept the project. So yeah, again, it's that message of really trying to listen to what people are saying and genuinely listen, because often these participatory aspects of projects aren't genuine opportunities to voice opinions. And then a stronger intention, there's a stronger intention to accept the technology if it's perceived as valuable. And this was another finding from a study at Behave, that if people saw that the technology actually did deliver benefits in terms of climate change and mitigation and energy efficiency, they were more likely to accept it. So if we're telling people that we're doing this for the environment, and people have to believe that it is actually delivering that benefit. And finally, and definitely not least, we need to move away from a technology push approach to a more needs-based approach. And again, this comes back to what we were talking about this morning, that we need to start with the users and what they need, rather than just having a mindset needing to push a particular technology to people. And so in this study, they were looking at a framework for this needs-based approach as an alternative to a technology push approach. So yeah, that was just a few key facts from what we learned at the Behave conference. There are lots and lots of studies in the proceedings, so if you're interested in hearing more on that, please do go to the proceedings. And then in this session, we're very lucky to have two really great presentations where we'll be looking at the topic of public acceptance from two different angles. So firstly, we're going to look at the project from the Renewable Grid Initiative and IEECP, where they'll be talking about their work on the acceptance of large energy infrastructure projects and the guidelines that they've developed. So they've done this work under one of the UsersTCP tasks. And then secondly, we'll have a presentation from ENEA, from the Italian Energy Agency, where we'll be looking at acceptance on a completely different level. So this is on the household level. And they did a study about encouraging people to accept technologies after they've been installed in their homes. So two very different angles, but I'm sure we'll see lots of synergies in the approaches and the best practices. So yeah, just a reminder, there'll be a Q&A, so think of your questions throughout the presentation and same to people online, and then we'll pick them up after each of the presentations. So now I would like to hand over to the team from UsersTCP. So we have Ira Sheffer, Nathália Fernandes, Pimentel, and Diana Süsser to take us through. Welcome very much to the session, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Adrianna, for the introduction and the presentation. Diana, Nathália, and myself would like to present to you some of about the project that we did under this task, about the meaningful public engagement to enhance the acceptance for large-scale energy infrastructure projects. And as you will see, it will reflect on some of the things that were discussed here in the introduction and before throughout this workshop. So before we dive into the project itself, we want to start with explaining a bit why we actually got into the idea of public engagement, the importance of it. So before jumping into the project itself, I'd like to say a few words of why we actually need public engagement. Why does it matter? So the projections, the aim, as was indicated, for example, in the last COP, the need to triple the amount of renewables by 2030, for example, in the EU, the renewable acceleration areas, and the need to expand and extend the supporting electricity grid system. Now, this means, in essence, that the energy production and also consumption are will be more decentralized than ever before, than what we used to have. And this process will eventually bring much more energy infrastructure closer to people home, to their communities, to their environment. And this is a process that cannot be top-down alone. This is something that the public needs to have a say, it needs to be involved. So we find that public participation practices and processes can coordinate the interest of the public and other stakeholders. They can better facilitate the expression of the perspectives needed for developing and boosting up energy projects. Now, talking about public participation, we actually need to also ask who to engage, how and why. So in our project, but also we find that the key actors that we focus on should be the policymakers and regulators, like the audience here in this workshop, the developers, meaning the industry, and also civil society organization, but not only them, but the residents and the communities affected by the energy infrastructure projects. How? And again, this shouldn't be a top-down approach, but shouldn't be only a bottom-up approach. This should be an integrative process, bottom-up and top-down together, through various means of collaborations, cooperations, and communications. So energy agencies that develop and implement the energy and climate policies and practices, how they can fulfill their mandates in order to develop these kind of practices, to develop and boost up energy infrastructure projects. And here's the thing, that public engagement should be a key component in this regard. And before we move into the project and explaining how our project addresses these issues, I would like to dedicate 1 minute to just explain a little bit about ourselves. So the UsersTCP public engagement for energy and infrastructure, public engagement for energy infrastructure task, it's part of the IEEE Technology Collaboration Program. It was run by the Renewables Grid Initiative and the IEECP, the Institute for European Energy and Climate Policy. The project was about 13 months and funded by Ireland, Netherlands, Sweden, the UK, and Switzerland. We focused, as Adrianna mentioned before, on large-scale projects, large-scale wind farm, large-scale solar farms, electricity grids, and a little bit about biomass. What we aimed for, the idea behind this project, is to identify the challenges and the drivers for effective public engagement. And we collected evidences for effective and ineffective approaches. And we did so through interviews, expert interviews, excessive literature reviews, real cases, and ongoing project that we were involved in. And the idea, the final output was developing a tool, an easy-to-use guiding tool for engagement around energy infrastructure. And you will also have a look to get acquainted a little bit more about the project and the tool itself later on in the presentation. And with that, I would like to ask Nathália to continue from this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Ida. As Ida mentioned, the project basically focused on trying to identify both the drivers but also the challenges of effective public engagement. And we try to identify what are actually the most important challenges that project promoters are facing and how they are relevant to the policymakers and civil society actors. And in this sense, we identified four main challenges. First of them, the little public engagement, meaning that people do not engage in the process or are not involved in the process for their own reasons. Secondly, we identified the public opposition. So basically, we saw a lot of protests within large infrastructure projects and basically leading to delays with the project itself. Then we also identified the saving resources challenge. So basically the limited resources, not only on costs, on money, but also time and the staff available to work on that. And also at the end, also institutional barriers that could be laid on either the general national policy, but also internal structures. And with these challenges, we're trying to understand also what are the forms of engagement that could lead to an effective engagement. And we identified three main forms of engagement, or three levels of engagement that actually could provide, using them all together, a really meaningful engagement process. So the first one would be creating awareness, sharing information with the stakeholders, the public, but also any stakeholder relevant to the process, and basically providing input. This would be only one-way communication. Then the consultation, which would be a two-way in which the public can also provide their own insights and inputs and concerns to the process, but they cannot share information about what they think the outcomes or the objectives of the process should be or should look like. And at the end, the empowerment in which the public and stakeholders can actually help shape the objectives and the outcomes, as well as provide input to the process. And it's very important to say, as I mentioned, that all these three levels are very important to be used together as a whole and to allow a very meaningful engagement. And working with all these three different forms of engagement, we also, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. We can also see basically 4 key principles that we identified that could actually summarize what meaningful public engagement could look like. So the first thing, and something that it's constant in our research and the expert interviews that we went through, was the early engagement. So basically involving stakeholders early enough in the process that they could actually provide insights that could fit into the project. But also transparency. So basically the whole process should be as transparent as possible, not only about the steps within the process, but also the outcomes and how the different stakeholders' input actually impacted those outcomes. Then also we identified the need for inclusiveness. So basically allowing different individuals and social groups to be involved in the whole life cycle, and that also correlates to the forms of engagement. So allowing that the different formats that it's used actually allow this inclusiveness to also be incorporated into the process. And then the last but not least is developing trust. So basically having an early engagement, a transparent process, and also an inclusive process can actually build this trust between the developers and the stakeholders, or the policymakers and the stakeholders. And with these three different elements, so basically the principles, the formats, and also the challenges, we created the Engage for Energy tool, which is a guideline available online and is an interactive PDF. And it's very importantly focused on the user. And it's also our idea to continue updating according to the newest research. And when I say it's focused on the user, what does that mean? So basically, we identify three main target groups that could use this tool specifically. One of them, developers in grid, wind, and solar. The second, policymakers at national, regional, and local levels. And third, the civil society as a whole, including organizations, but also citizens. And the whole tool, and you can explore it, it's online. It's basically focused on the needs of these groups and creates a pathway in which the person that is using the tool can provide more context to their specific challenge, to their specific phase within the project, and also we then give recommendations to what kind of principles and how they can use these principles in their specific context, and also what are the benefits for stakeholder public engagement in a meaningful way, and in general, what are some recommendations related to the formats that should be used. I don't think we have the time to go through it live, but I encourage you to truly explore and try to understand it, and also provide any feedback for us. We are very happy to receive that. And I'll give the floor back to Ida for some best practice examples.
Thank you, Nati. I think we could also share the link to the guide to the project into the chat a bit later on. And now what we'll do, we'll provide three examples that represent the elements that we just discussed in this project. Inspirational examples from wind, solar, and grids. Starting with the wind. Sorry, I won't get into the nitty-gritties and the details of this engagement project, but I would like to stress a few points, interesting points. This is a project made by the Scottish Power Renewables, SPR, called Masher Wind, on the west coast of Scotland. It's an interesting mix of information sharing and consultation processes. And I think one of the most interesting practices that in the process of public engagement was, first of all, designated a special team within the company, within the developer, to engage with the community to address this issue. So it's a designated team. And not only that, that a special function called the Community Engagement Manager was recruited from the community itself, and not coming externally from within the company or from someplace else. Other interesting issues was that this project is having irregular updates to the community about the progress and about the issues raised within the construction, the planning and implementation of the infrastructure. And another interesting thing that you can see here in the picture is some sort of educational activities that developer did together with the community and other stakeholders with children and other community members in order to, first of all, trying to understand what is renewable energy, what is wind energy, and why wind energy infrastructure is being built on the shore of this community, and the context of the importance of this infrastructure to the overall energy transition and the need to tackle climate change. So what we see here is three of the elements Nati mentioned before, which is the trust, the inclusiveness, and the transparency. And we see that these are how they're reflected in this process, and we try to think also in the context of this workshop how energy agencies can support these kind of moves directly or indirectly. But we'll come to that a bit later on throughout the presentation. And I would ask Diana, please, to present the case about solar. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. So another interesting project is Viral Solar, which has been implemented in Portugal and Spain. I think what makes it here quite specific is that really like residents, but also businesses have been empowered to become actually part of an energy sharing community. But importantly, kind of the energy supplier, which was EDP, in one of the cases, maintained actually the ownership of the solar panels. So it was not required that people would have to need the money, you know, to actually put up solar panels on their roofs, but it was kind of really provided by the energy supplier, which really made it also possible to address like specific challenges in the communities, like reducing the energy bills, addressing energy poverty, and really enable an inclusive engagement. So it's kind of quite important here, like when we come back to the factors, that everyone could actually participate, be part of the process. And because the people have been involved also so closely in the whole development and the ideas, it also led really to the creation of trust among the different stakeholders. So it was not only ETP and like other actors, but also local authorities who kind of, you know, collectively collaborated with the citizens together and who really gained a good trust basis in the context of the project. And yeah, that's why it was one project that kind of started, but then it got even expanded because it was so successful.
To finalize the best practices that we brought here today, I'll talk a little bit about the grid example. And this specific one was in 2008 in the Netherlands. And the TSO, the transmission system operator of the Netherlands, TenneT, was responsible for the engagement process here. And this is a clear example of the empowerment being used in grid projects. So basically, they created a co-design process with the stakeholders to allow an impact assessment, an environmental impact assessment to be made together with the stakeholders. And basically, for example, things that they didn't even consider as part of the process of engagement, for example, the design, the way the pylons are designed, was something that one of the people in this process, one of the citizens, brought to them. And it wasn't something that they came up with when thinking about the process itself, but actually allowed them to redesign the whole idea of how grids could look like in the future. So this is a great example of how bringing together a diverse set of stakeholders in a co-design process can actually improve the project itself, but also beyond that, and really creating a beneficial and a more quality to the project itself, but also beyond into the more strategic thinking.
So to summarize a little bit, we brought with us kind of 5 key takeaways on what you can do to support meaningful public engagement. Of course, depending on your specific mandate, some of the points might be more relevant or less relevant, but still we hope that, yeah, it's kind of a nice roundup of what we kind of expressed before. So the first one would be to communicate about the energy transition and the engagement opportunities. So we think you, can play very crucial role here in clearly communicating, why the energy transition is kind of needed, what are also the challenges we are currently facing, but what are also the specific opportunities, how the people can become part of the transition and play really an active role in the energy generation, storage, and in the future. The second one is about enabling the public to become co-owners of the decision-making process. Of course, energy communities are kind of high on many political agendas, have become quite an important topics, but there are different ways, of ownership that can be explored. So I think it's very relevant here to be really inclusive, to think about models where everyone can participate, not only the people that are having money, but how we can also address specifically marginalized groups in the energy transition, to be really transparent about the processes, so what is kind of happening in the environments of the people, and of course to engage also early, to really allow also people to become part and to take ownership of the decision-making processes that are happening in their surroundings. The third aspect is to initiate a strong and trusted multi-level and multi-stakeholder collaborations. So I think you can really play kind of an active role here in bringing different actors together and in building up kind of meaningful collaborations. So I think collaborations is needed really across different governance levels, but of course also involving kind of different stakeholders. We talked already about the developers, about the NGOs, but really also about the citizens and communities on the ground who are affected by the different energy infrastructure projects. Fourth, it's important that you provide also the resources for public engagement. Ira was at the beginning talking about the big urgent, the urgency also to implement specific energy infrastructure. Of course, that's kind of a challenge that we are running a bit out of time, and that we want to speed up, of course, the development of renewables, but also grid infrastructure. But nevertheless, we see it as important that public engagement is not falling behind, but that it's still kind of considered, that we make the time to really consider how the public can and wants to participate in the process, to understand really their needs, to provide dedicated budget within the specific organizations to implement the actions, and also to build the necessary capacities. So it's not that maybe within all the organizations the knowledge is necessarily there. So I think it might be also required really to buy in kind of new knowledge here for the different organizations to really enable meaningful participation tools and methods. And last but not least, to consider really how the project can create a local and regional added value and kind of long term. So we talked already about it. We want to enable kind of a just and a fair transition, and that really requires that we are not only taking, but also giving kind of something back. It can be in form of kind of ownership, but we can also talk about employment, about nature-based solution, recreation activities in the areas where the people are. So there are really different forms of values that can be provided to the people. And those, of course, can be also, identified together with the citizens and communities. So that were kind of, the key takeaways, what you can do. Of course, please have a look at our website. We will provide the resources. I think they will appear just in a second on the left-hand side. So on our website, Public Engagement for Energy Infrastructure, you can find 2 specific reports on drivers and barriers, but also on the impact assessment of case studies. So what's really the added value of doing public engagement? You can also find a link to our interactive guide. And we have recently also published a policy brief, which is also available there. So we are happy now to answer your questions, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Nathália, Ira, and Diana. Thank you for the really informative presentation. So we've got some questions in the chat for you, but I was just going to check if there are any questions in the room. Oh, yes, please.
I would like to add to the last slide of Diana Süsser presentation, when it's saying enable the public to become co-owners of the decision-making process. I think that people should not just co-owner the decision-making process, but also be co-owners of the equipment of the solar panels or other kind of clean resources energy. Because I saw when you were presenting the Bairro Solar in Portugal, is the energy provider that owns the PV panels. And it should help the community and the residents, not just managing, but also how to invest and be owners of their system.
Yes, I think we will hear about it in a second, I guess, like how it can be actually done. I think our focus was a little bit more, in fact, on a large scale infrastructure, specifically when we talk about, a grid infrastructure. It might be kind of a bit of a different story, but Ira might want to add on that. But of course, it's a common approach for solar, for wind, where we see a lot of energy communities that are forming and that provide a big opportunity. I think one critical point is always about how can we make it inclusive, because not everyone maybe has the money to necessarily make investments. So I think that's where we have to be smart about the models, not to empower and include the people that are actually having the savings, but to really bring it up to the benefit of the larger society.
And Ira, did you want to come in as well? I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, just to strengthen what Diana has mentioned about the grids, which are usually it's a national entity, and this is a public endeavor that actually takes place, and the public is usually cannot take part or own this kind of infrastructure. And also we need to consider this element when we think about large-scale offshore wind farms, which are usually being constructed by very large corporations. So, and a big bulk of the energy transition, at least the renewable energy, will come from these kinds of infrastructure. So this is something definitely needs to be considered, the extent of ownership in this regard.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions from the audience, Renee?
If possible. We've talked about just transition way before this. And if you look at a community, it consists usually of various sub-communities that need to be addressed. It needs to be tailor-made. You've got a certain system in place. If you look at people in poverty, they usually don't have the bandwidth to just be engaged in such a process. How do you deal with that?
Yes, it's definitely a challenge. I work also a lot myself on just transition processes, also in a lot of coal regions, right? So I think first of all, it's important to identify like the different groups and to really ask them how they would like to be engaged. I think it's a lot of effort really to go out there to work and collaborate also with specific NGOs who have maybe also a good overview about maybe more like the energy poor households or the marginalized groups. So to have maybe also trusted organizations with you on your side that maybe have already access to a specific target group that you maybe, for example, find very hard to reach. In general, yes, I think that's a kind of interesting approach to go via, people that are already known in the community. So not come as an outsider and then just approach the different people, but look really for trusted people already in the communities. And that's also what we see, what many energy companies are now doing, that they have a local office, some representatives there really from the region to gain trust among the population and also to reach, to those groups.
Thank you, Diana. Any other questions? Otherwise, we have some questions online. So we have a very good question about what do we mean when we, give people a real voice in these projects. So the question is it enough just to give a group of people the chance to express their opinion, or do they really have to understand the technology and the project in some detail before they can participate in a meaningful way?
It's a good question. I think it can be both in a way because, for example, what we noticed in the cases that we examined that understanding the technology requires some sort of knowledge and expertise, and this can be actually the public can be equipped with that, can be engaged in learning about the certain types of technologies and the need and the advantages. And this is expressed sometimes, for example, in grids, in the participation of either designing electricity grid pilots, whether they should be the certain height or certain width or a certain type of, or what are the routes to make the grids. So choosing between several alternatives. So this is an example that can be related to the technology in question. So it's a voice about the technology itself, but also about where to put it, how to put it, and so forth.
Thanks. Nathália?
Yes, just to complement Ira, also having a national strategy that allows citizens to really understand the climate transition and its different aspects is a very important part of it. So not only starting, I think another question was how early is early? Actually, our guide starts at the policy making process, and we really getting people to understand the challenge that we have at hand with the energy transition as a whole. It's a really important step because this will then, for example, for grids, a lot of people don't understand why do we need grids. And then really understanding this process, they can actually maybe oppose a little bit less when the project comes to them, to their surroundings in the end. So I think it's really part of the process to really creating this climate awareness.
Great, thank you. And the next question we have from the people online is, engagement is such a broad term used in lots of different contexts. Did you identify any effective engagement tactics that are more unique to energy projects?
I mean, what we definitely did, we reviewed kind of different methods and tools that, you know, are common, that are used across different energy infrastructure projects. So please really have a look if you're specific interested. I think what is quite interesting, what comes across the different projects is really to need to go local, to really understand the communities, to engage with them, to understand the different needs and kind of concerns. And it can be like a simple household survey. So really that you go and you knock on the doors of the people and ask them, you know, what are your perspectives? Like, what do you think, for example, about a wind turbine or a solar panel? And this can also sometimes help in not like getting already an understanding of what a whole group thinks, because sometimes you have this group dynamics. Specifically, if you maybe have a group of people that are opposing a technology, it seems like everyone is against it. But once you go to individuals and you start engaging with them, you might get a quite different picture that in fact maybe people who are more, you know, reservative, they actually say, actually, I think it's a good idea, but you know, I'm not like willing to express it, for example, in front of kind of other people. So I think there are a lot of, you know, small things that you can do to really, you know, go to the people and listen. So I think listening is quite important before you come and propose kind of specific project ideas. First to understand, and also this question of having a broader vision for the community was quite essential. So often what we heard from different experts is that we go beyond energy. So it's not only about the energy vision for the regions, but often regions maybe also lack a specific vision for how their community will look like in the future. So really starting maybe from that could be also an interesting aspect, so that communities are kind of, let's say, pre-prepared if an energy developer comes, that they have already a common understanding in the community what they actually want and how they would like to see the community developed.
Okay. Ira, did you want to come in?
Just tapping on that, and this is something that came into my mind now, but we have some certain discussions about it also at LGI and while doing this project with the IEECP. about the effective engagement tactics for whether they're unique or not for energy project. I think the issue here is renewables, and some parts of the grids are something new, relatively new in the social sphere. So in the sense, if you think about water utilities, trains, roads, and other kinds of infrastructure, they're not so new and people are used to it, but suddenly new infrastructure comes and covers the whole area, the whole territory. And in this sense, I think some of the things that we analyzed and came about with are at the moment seem unique to what we to energy, but perhaps can be, we need to test them or see whether they are applicable to other infrastructures as well, and vice versa, of course.
Great. Yeah, there might be more potential for cross-sector learning there. And you've touched on this one already, but I'll just pose the question in case there's anything else you'd like to add. Again, a very good question from our online audience. So one of the principles was early engagement is something we should be doing, but how early is early? Is it before we've even decided to do the project? Because that's based on other factors. Maybe those decisions are already made by the time we get to implementing the project. So how early is early? And I know, Diana, you said that including people in the vision is also important. But yeah, any final reflections on that point?
Well, I touch upon the policy making stage, but also within the project itself, it's really important to engage before any decision is already set in stone. One of the things that we saw in our research and also in the expert interviews was that if people think they cannot actually provide something that will change, that will have an impact in the project outcome, they might not even get engaged, because what's the point? So that's a really important thing in the early engagement, is that before you even, for example, for grids, decide on the route or anything in that sense, you should engage with the people. And also, I think the question asks about examples, specific examples on the policymaking side. Yes, we identify them. And I think Diana mentioned in the presentation that we have a report assessing 98 cases, best and bad practices, but also in the two of after each one of the pathways, there is a inspirational example. So something that can help you understand how these principles can be incorporated into real life cases. And that also applies for the policymaking stage. So yeah, I think that's it from my head.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. That's very clear, and yeah, it reflects, I think, what we've learned already, that the people's opinion has to matter. If it doesn't matter, then people see through that and aren't so engaged with the process. Okay, well, thank you so much to Ira, Diana, and Nathália. Really great presentation, and thank you for spending the time answering our questions. And now we're going to be moving on to our second speaker. We have Mariagiovanna Gaglione from ENEA, the Italian Energy Agency, talking about a recent research project that they did. So now we're looking at acceptance from a different perspective, from the household perspective. And yeah, I'm looking forward to your findings. Thank you, Mariagiovanna.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Aden, for organizing this amazing workshop to share insights on to accelerate the just energy transition. And thanks, Adrianna, Rebecca, Luis, and Sam for having me today. So I said I work in the ENEA, which is the Italian Energy Efficiency Agency, which is a part of the big energy body that works on public body that works on new technologies and sustainable development. And I work in the Department of Energy Efficiency, specifically to promote energy efficiency culture. And and I'm part of the behavior change group of ENR chaired by Rebecca. And with this, within this department, we carry out the Italian Class A, which is the National Information and Training Program for Energy Efficiency, which is promoted by the Ministry of Environment and Energy Security. And we've been carried out this program since 2016, so such a long time. It's a big program that it's a long-term program on information and training activities. We do a lot of actions targeted not only domestic and households, but also the public sector or the great public. Or for example, we perform energy audit for SMEs to use incentive tools available addressed to installing efficient technologies. Or for example, many things for education sector. So it's a very big program, but with this action we tried to go a little bit further and to go to engage households in the energy transition in a different way, and I will show how we did. So. As I said, we presented this action in the Behaviour conference with my colleague Anna Mato, that together with me designed this project within the ENEA. And so you can also have a look at the proceedings of the conference when you can know about more about this action. And this OKIA, we chose this name OKIA, which is the Greek name, which is the ancient Greek name. This word was chosen because in ancient Greek, oikos refers to the house seen from the outside. But oikia is the house lived within, and it expresses the feeling of being home in a comfortable and familiar surrounding, where many activities take place, and when right management of energy use can make the difference and reach faster the climate goals. So in particular, this in action, not a big action, but it's focused on behavior change, targeting households who have recently carried out energy efficient renovations. As a matter of fact, we were asked, for example, during the presentation at Behave conference, why we chose, we had to choose this particular phase of this journey, and I will explain later why we chose to investigate all the behaviors after the renovation. Main objectives of this action are to spread energy efficiency culture and increase households' energy literacy through a reflexive learning approach, and at the same time to avoid behavioral impacts. We know from literature that after, for scientific literature, that it happens after renovation with the energy efficiency measures, that sometimes some rebound effect can happen. So there are behavioral responses to the introduction of new efficient technologies which tend to cancel or reduce the positive impacts expected from the renovation. And this phenomenon depends on the habits and the lifestyle of people who live in the house, and on their social demographic profile, for example, from factors like age, education, gender, country of origin, and other personal ideas. And so we would like to focus with this interaction between people and all the system they live in. We chose a co-design approach, a bottom-up approach to develop the guidelines on post-retrofitting behaviors, so to boost this impact of energy efficiency measures, and especially to increase indoor comfort. So, as I said, the background and the motivation of this action is to investigate on this interaction between occupants and dwellings in the control of, for example, ventilation, heating, cooling, because we know that half of the building energy consumption is related, yes, to building envelope characteristics and the utilization of the building equipment, but the other half is of the behavior, depends on the behavior of people who live in the house. And above, and also the new systems, the new devices that were introduced in these homes, like, for example, photovoltaic system, heat pumps, thermostats, or mechanical ventilation. Many devices, of course, they need to be understood, they need to be managed in the daily routine, and people should also know how to use and how to repair little maintenance for these systems, ordinary maintenance. So we started from the assumption that living in renovated dwellings means acquiring new knowledge, new skills, and change behavior and change habits in order to profit and to enjoy the new environment. And so the main goal of this action is to support citizens that are involved in the energy transition, providing advice. We don't want to call it nudges, but advice, impartial advice, practical tips, and above all, a network to share and enhance common values, such as environmental sensitivity. Of course, we know that we should achieve, in order to reach climate goals, and energy demand reduction. And to consume less through behaviors, we have two types of behavior. The curtailment behavior, which means for actions like setting down the thermostats or having less showers or other action that reduce energy. But also we need the efficiency behavior. Because making homes more efficient can facilitate greater reductions in energy use and improve the living condition and reach climate goals faster. We know also from the recast, for example, of the building directive that these efficient new technologies are in the homes, in the domestic sector, in the buildings, are a crucial point to reach climate goals. So the expectations of this, of course, of this directive is to double or to triple the renovation rate within 2030. So we know that these kind of actions, the supporting actions, should be carried out more and more in the future, in the nearest future. And also that the choice to work together with this more target group, I will explain later, exploring this household dimension had a replication scope, because of course we have to design further programs for energy efficiency training and information program, and we want to take some important takeouts or highlights that we can introduce in in the future activities. And not only that, we know, for example, there is a recommendation from European Commission in 2022 that this recommendation is to carry out post-renovation surveys about the perception of typical performance aspects, for example, comfort, safety, air quality, noise, quality of life in the neighborhoods. So we wanted also to investigate the extent on which the people who had renovated their homes could appreciate also multiple impacts of these energy efficiency measures, for example, the indoor comfort or quality of life. So we want to widen this perspective, not only energy reduction. Many awareness campaigns that support energy efficiency programs using behavioral insights include general and tailored communication, social media, training and information activities that, for example, in Italy, with our information and training program, we used a lot this, especially in the first phase, where an awareness on the subject of energy efficiency should be a reason. But it is important to increase, of course, energy literacy to make the public acceptance of this transition easier. But from behavioral insights, we know that information is not sufficient to sustain behavior change in the long term. So behavior is not only an individual process, but also a social process with the neighborhood and the local communities. We know that social norms, peer-to-peer learning, engaging communication strategy seems to work better. And people wanted to have messages from a trusted and impartial source. And this is also one of the goals of the Energy Efficiency Agency in Italy, for example, but not also local energy hubs, for example, that could help in the municipalities and give this kind of an information, so people could have all the information and all the skills to make choices. And there is another rebound effect, which is positive in this case, that people who had renovating their homes can speak of the benefit with their neighbors, and so there was a good impact in replicating these activities. Of course, the answer of the question why we chose to focus this action after renovation, because this is all energy efficiency journey phases are important, and this phase after renovation, it is very important because in the long term, all the adoption of a new sustainable behavior and its long-term persistence should, as I said, supported by the community and by soft measures, for example. So that's why we decided to make this action at this phase of the journey for households. Let's go into the projects. So the pilot project aims at testing a methodology that can be scaled or replicated on a larger target group, and overcoming new technological barriers, all the difficulties that they faced, and identifying the drivers and effective key messages for information and awareness raising campaign, and designing new instruments and methods for capacity building. We decided to adopt a methodology based on a technical and behavioral questionnaire we drafted within ENEA with some also researchers, with the help of some researchers, and also using behavioral insights. And we made a lot of in-depth interviews and informal interaction with the households. The engagement strategy consisted in home visits, workshops, and phone calls. The partners that we chose for this action were very important, which is ASFOR, a knowledge and training company, Federconsumatori Lazio, which is a consumers association, that it was very important to identify these people, these households, and Rete Assist, which is a network of home energy advisors that they came from another project. We had more an impact on vulnerable groups, but we took these people, we upskilled them, and we used in their skills in this project. So the participants group was made of 72 households living in 28 dwellings located in the Rome area, not only in the city, but all the area. And their homes were renovated with the thermal insulation of envelope or installation of photovoltaic panel systems, electricity charging stations. All of them were private homeowners paying energy and operating costs. And they made this renovation using fiscal incentives. And the type of buildings were detached and semi-detached houses, and for the minority, but the majority was apartments in Rome, in the city of Rome. The education level was medium-high, a lot of people with the university degrees, families, so primary schools and secondary schools, because there were, of course, children in these families. As you see from the answers, energy renovation in this case was stimulated by fiscal incentives. They early used the incentives that Italy measures have for a company to support the energy transitions. So they had windows and doors replacement, for example, solar shading, boiler or radiant replacement, photovoltaic system installations, thermal insulation, and model heat pumps. Few ones. And some of the renovation regarded the whole building, condominium renovation, insulation, photovoltaic systems with storage, and the thermal envelope. And they reflect all the majority of the renovation activities made in Italy in 2023. And it was a good representative sample. The questionnaire that was delivered by these home energy advisors, we decided to deliver this questionnaire in presence. So the advisors made some home visits in order to understand and to meet these people and to see with their own eyes the renovated dwellings. And the items that were inside the questionnaire were, for example, about the type of dwelling, the occupant's profile, as I said, their occupation, their energy behavior and habits, or, for example, number of hours spent indoor, the heating and cooling habits, or the usage of a thermostat in different rooms of the house. And the support, for example, they received from installers after the installation, the retrofitting works, and if they decided after that to make future renovation projects. There is a lot of questions about domestic appliances, labeling information daily use, and also about gas appliances and their daily use, because we have in Italy we have a strong dependence on gas devices even in domestic dwellings. The engagement strategy was, as I said earlier, a kickoff, a lot of meetings, even though this action was carried out during post-pandemic. So it was very difficult to gain people's trust because there were some measures to protect, of course, the diffusion of the pandemic. So this Consumers Association made a really excellent job in order to convince people to gather, to come to the workshop, and to have a meeting in person. So this home visit rolled out from December to April. And we had a mid-term workshop in July 21 years ago, because one of the aim of this project was to draft a guideline with a participatory approach. So we drafted a guideline and present it to the audience, to the households, and see if it was enough or which improvements they wanted on these guidelines, if the language was chosen was clear, or if they wanted some online, for example, information, but they preferred this guideline, and they can download it, but they asked for a brochure so they could have it in their homes and look now and then. And then we had the final event last December. Of course, one of the main objectives was a community creation. So to change best practice and to create this rebound positive effect of the technologies that they had in their homes. They had to share. The peer-to-peer learning was very effective. But we did also some awareness raising action and webinars with the broader public during the project. We also used the KPI. We didn't want to choose the KPI about energy saving. Although normally we do this KPI on energy saving, some researcher even in ENEA on some campaign in industry. We presented this, for example, in Behave conference, not the last, but the previous one. But it was not the case of this action. We just want to assess the indoor comfort perception, or the settled temperature for boiler and for heating, and the comprehension of technical instructions and knowledge of terms about energy, or the assessment of digital skills related to energy production and consumption, and use of domestic appliances and lighting systems. Some highlights from this part that households can react to innovative technological solutions sometimes in an unexpected way. For example, this automation paradox that they won't control. They want more automation, but they won't control it. And this also happened during these home visits. And we one of the takeaways was the importance of balancing for sophisticated automation with user control and satisfaction, and empowering them with new knowledge. There were a lot of talks, even phone talks with the households with the practical tips. These are the improvements. We asked about improvements. The general satisfaction with instruction provided by installers. A few households knew about the routine maintenance of new systems. Others asked for some tips. A minority of households complained about the lack of support of installers. And this is very important because we have to consider that in the energy sufficiency supply chain, this medium phase of installers are very important. In the case of these households, they didn't have the knowledge to make to choose this technology or the other. They were depended on the company they refer to or from the installers. So it's very important to give to raise awareness about the technologies. I heard it many times today during the workshop, and I can of course agree with this. And in fact, many of them asked for impartial sources at the local level, and fortunately, it's one of the aspects that it's very important. The challenges encountered, for example, the delays in connecting photovoltaic systems to the grid, and it depends on the DSO. We have this situation in Italy, and change in daily routine habits to do electrification. It was very difficult for some of them to change habits in cooking. It's very important for many of them to cook, and they said that they had to change their habits from gas to electric hobs, and some didn't want to these induction hobs, electric hobs, because they were they didn't want to change the habit in cooking, for example. Or in other cases, people who installed the photovoltaic system, they had to change their, for example, they have to use washing machines or dishing machines during the day when the production of energy is higher. While in Italy, we have this double fare. For example, we have this with the normal electricity, we have this fare that we can, of course, pay less on weekends and after 7 in the afternoon. So these people who installed solar system, they had to change again to their habits, and they asked, for example, for domotics or for control, because if they were not at home, they wanted, for example, to start their dishing machine or washing machine during the day. And above all was the recognition of upgraded indoor comfort after an innovation. This was this consciousness of the multiple and benefit effects of energy efficiency on indoor comfort was not clear for many of us. So we endorse this new consciousness about indoor comfort upgrade. Another thing that this is the electric appliances that they used, and they willing to, for example, to replace a household appliance with a class A label. For example, we acknowledged that despite their education, which was medium high, and their economic availability, households were scarcely aware of power of their electric appliances or labeling of domestic appliances or existing efficient consumption habits that could impact on indoor comfort and air quality. Last year, this July, for example, we had a very heat wave, and we, from some question, we knew that these people, for example, they use cooling systems at very, very low temperature, 18 degrees, while outside it was 35, 36 degrees. And so we raised awareness on the not only on energy consumption, but also on effects on Earth, that this difference should be not so high between indoor and outdoor temperature. Many responses, as I said, would like to undertake new projects, for example, replacing boilers and appliances or installing solar tent panels or photovoltaic systems in the future. As I said, we drafted these practical guides on the basis of all the feedback we received from the audience, from these households, and we provided the practical tips to boost behavior changes after renovation when using new efficient technologies, very easy, language clear, So the contents were cooling, A, and photovoltaic and solar systems, indoor comfort, and domotics. As I said, a lot of questions about domotic systems. And this was some to finish some takeaways from this action, that this action explored the public acceptance of new energy technologies in the households dimension and obtained honest and actual feedback in an empirical way. We chose these household dimensions because we know that the domestic dimension is a very special energy site where public and private sphere blur. So the energy citizenship in the household dimensions can be lived and nurtured with new skills, new habits, and technologies, so they can where energy efficiency culture can spread to meet climate goals. And of course, we will use this takeout in designing the new campaign for the next 3 years in the future. And for any questions, you can visit the proceedings of BHAV conference. And thank you for the attention at this time of the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariagiovanna. Yeah, really interesting journey that you went on with your project. So I'll just open up the floor to some brief questions, if there are any questions or comments from the audience. Just a brief one from me, Mariagiovanna. You mentioned in your process of developing the guidelines that you were doing things like peer-to-peer learning, awareness raising, information. Was there something that to you seemed like the most effective way of promoting that acceptance? Was it more the peer-to-peer learning, the information? Was there something that stood out?
Yeah, it was very effective because, of course, first of all, we had to adjust our language because we are more accustomed to deliver information in more technical way. So it was important to develop a communication strategy which really met the household's needs. So this engagement strategy, as I said, of course, it cannot be replicated on a larger scale, but this technique was really effective in raising all the questions, also all the objections that the people had towards the installing of new technologies. We didn't have to indicate on the motivation because they most of all used the fiscal incentives, but we had to use about also we wanted to raise their environmental sensitivity, how these things could affect their well-being and contribute to meet a climate goal, which is I think that we don't repeat it enough, that we all do this in order to reach these goals, because people firstly think about, of course, of saving energy, and we had to challenge, because at this time of the action, the costs of electricity were very, very high due to the pandemic. So we had to explain that because many of the people said, okay, I had a new installation, but my bills are the same because the electricity costs were very high at the moment. So also to give feedback to these issues was important. So yes,
Okay.
this technique was very important for us.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. Yeah, and thank you for showing us that. Oh, there's a question in the audience here.
Thanks, and thanks, Mariagiovanna. You mentioned about the KPIs, and it was interesting that you said you didn't use savings. It was about different KPIs. With the KPIs that you said, did you do a before and after comparison with the homeowners or the people that are in the homes to gauge what was the change, or how did you set the KPIs? Just a little bit of information on that.
Oh, you were
Okay. Okay. Now, the KPI we set it. The KPI we showed, and we tried to through these interviews and through all the questions, and the questionnaire was made also at the end of the project. So we tried to get from then how the perception of better indoor comfort was achieved. So it was especially about this KPI about how they answered to our question and how they were engaged in this action. As for us, as I said, it's not only about savings, but how the public acceptance of this technology could happen. And if you perceive that these technologies not only help you to save money, but also to live better, to have a better quality of life, and to participate in reaching climate goals, this is was very important for us to assess that this households group had this new consciousness about this.
Okay, great. So in the interest of time, I think we're going to have to wrap up. There is one more question online. I wonder maybe Mariagiovanna, if you could type a message, an answer to that question that is online. And then that brings us to the end of this session.